Ring it up separate, Amara Bassi said, and did not look up from the pot. It was 11:47 on a Tuesday night at the corner of 6th and Alameda, and the last order in Bukchin Table's kitchen was a bowl of peppered oxtail doenjang soup. The recipe her mother had started and she had finished, and she plated it the way she plated every bowl, cloth folded once under her palm so the rim came out clean. Spoon laid at a diagonal, no drip on the lip of the dish. 3 men had come in at closing. 2 stood by the door with their hands folded in front of them like men who had been taught to stand that way. The third sat alone in the back booth with his coat still buttoned, and when the bowl reached him, he did not eat right away. He looked at it first. Then he looked at the kitchen pass-through, where he could see, for half a second, a woman with flour on her wrist and a burn scar shaped like a comma just above it. He picked up the spoon. He set it down again before it reached his mouth. "Who made this?" he said. It was not a question. It came out flat, the way a man asks something he is afraid of the answer to. "Mister," oh, the manager laughed too fast. "Our cook. Nobody special. I can have her make you something better, bring her out." Amara wiped her hands on her apron and came to the pass-through instead, because she did not go out to dining rooms for men who sat with their coats buttoned at midnight, not for anyone, not even one who was already reaching for his wallet like the night required an apology. "You made this," he said again, and this time it was a question, and this time his voice cracked somewhere in the middle of it, in a place he had not expected it to crack. "I did." "What is in it?" "Family," she said, because she was tired and it was true, and she went back to scrubbing the pot before he could ask anything else. He would ask her name 4 more times before that night ended, in 4 different ways, and none of them would work, and he did not know yet that 600 feet away, behind a curtain hung on a shower rod, in the dry storage room of that same kitchen, was a cot, a nightlight shaped like a moon, and a folded stack of her son's outgrown clothes she could not bring herself to give away. He did not know that the woman who had just handed him the best thing he had tasted in 11 years was the reason his own signature, from 14 months earlier, mattered more than anything else on his desk. He would not know any of it for 6 more days. 3 days earlier, none of this had started yet, and Amara had been doing what she always did on a Saturday morning, before the restaurant opened, counting. She counted the register drawer twice, out of habit, though it was not hers to count. She counted the eggs, 31, 4 short of what the delivery slip said. She counted the money in the coffee can under her cot, $186, which had to become groceries, and Chidi's asthma refill, and $40 to Ward Ngozi before the 15th. And then she counted the only thing in the room that had never once let her down. The pot, copper 9 quarts, a dent on the left handle from a fall down a church basement staircase in 2011. Her mother, Nkiru, had bought it for $14 at a rummage sale the year Amara turned 9, had cooked in it every Sunday until the year she died, and had told Amara exactly one thing about it that Amara had never stopped believing: feed the table before you feed your name. On a good night, that pot fed 40 people. On a bad night, it fed 4, and there was enough left for breakfast. It had never once been empty when someone needed it, and Amara had built the last 4 months of her life around making sure that stayed true, even as everything around the pot fell apart. She had slept behind that kitchen for 134 nights. It had started with an apartment on Wilton she could no longer afford, after her hours were cut without warning 14 months ago. 1950, an hour down to 1175, no notice, no explanation, just a memo taped to the walk-in that used the words portfolio efficiency, and nobody in the kitchen understood what that meant, except that their checks got smaller. She had sent Chidi to Houston to stay with her sister because a 7-year-old boy needed a bed and a school and a yard, and none of those things fit behind a kitchen curtain. She called him every night at 7. She had not told him where she slept. She had not told anyone except the old dishwasher, Pakeman Sue, who found her the first week with a blanket over her shoulders at 2 in the morning and never said a word about it to Mr. O not once, not in 4 months, and who left an extra thermos of barley tea by her cot most mornings before the sun came up. "You are still here," Mr. O said to her that Saturday, not a question either, the way he said most things. "I'm always here. There's a corporate walkthrough coming, someone from the ownership group. You understand what that means for someone sleeping in a supply closet. It's not a supply closet, it's dry storage. It is whatever they decide to call it when they decide to fire both of us." She did not answer that because there was nothing in it worth answering, and because arguing with Mr. O cost more than it returned, and because she needed this job the way the pot needed heat. She went back to the eggs. 31. 4 short. She would make it work. She always made it work. What she did not know, what nobody in that kitchen knew, not even Mr. O, who only knew he had orders from a company called KG Realty to cut costs by any means that did not appear on paper, was that 11 floors above a boardroom in downtown Los Angeles, a man named Kang Do-hun had signed the document that started all of it on a Tuesday morning 14 months earlier between 2 other signatures without reading past the summary page. He had not thought about that signature since. He had signed 40 like it that quarter. He would not connect it to a soup pot or a curtain on a shower rod or a woman named Amara Bassi for 6 more days, and when he did, it would cost him more than any deal he had ever closed. 11 floors up, at almost the same hour, Amara was counting eggs. Kang Do-yoon was standing at a window that looked out over a city he owned pieces of and had never once walked through on foot. His office had no photographs in it. His desk had no clutter. The only thing that broke the symmetry of the room was a single drawer, 3rd from the top, that he never opened during business hours because it held one photograph of a woman in an apron standing in front of a restaurant that no longer existed, and he had learned a long time ago that grief performed badly in front of a board. "The Alameda corridor vote is in 9 days, said his lieutenant, Yoon Ji-min, setting a folder on the desk without being asked. "Legal wants your signature on the demolition timeline by Thursday. Which properties? Everything between 5th and 8th. 22 leases, most of them under KG Realty's Q3 directive already. It streamlines the write-off." He did not answer right away. He was looking at the folder without opening it, the way a man looks at a door he already knows what is behind. "My uncle wants it moved faster," Yoon added. "He says every week we sit on it is a week a competitor undercuts the land value. Chairman Kang wants a lot of things. He's still chairman." For now. Yoon almost smiled at that, the way she did whenever he let something slip that was not quite appropriate for a board memo. She had worked for him 9 years. She knew the difference between the version of him that ran the company and the version that showed up maybe twice a year, briefly, like weather. There's a meeting tonight on Alameda. Song wants you at the gala after. She's been asking why you keep missing her calls. Tell her I'll be there. Will you? He didn't answer that either. He was already reaching for his coat. Because the meeting on Alameda ran late most nights, and because something in him, some old, unnamed hunger he had stopped questioning years ago, always wanted, after those meetings, something warm to eat before he went home to an apartment that had never once felt like a place a person lived. He did not know the address of the restaurant his driver was about to choose. He did not know it belonged, on paper, 12 layers down, to his own company. He only knew when the car stopped at 6th and Alameda under a sign that read Bukchan Table, that something about the light in the window made him tell the driver to wait. And something about the smell coming through the door before he had even opened it made his chest do something it had not done since he was 9 years old, standing in a kitchen very much like this one, watching his mother stir a pot with her sleeves rolled to the elbow. Which brings us back to that night, to the bowl, to the spoon he set down before it reached his mouth, to the question he asked twice before anyone answered him. Who made this? He said a third time, standing now, ignoring the two men at the door who tensed at the movement. Amara had come out from behind the pass-through by then, because Mr. O's laugh had gotten too high and too fast, and she did not trust what he might say to make this stranger happy. She stood at the edge of the dining room with her arms loose at her sides, not crossed, not defensive, just still. The way she stood when she had decided nothing about this moment required her to be smaller than she was. I told you already, she said. I did. Do it again. Slower. It's soup, not a magic trick. One of the men at the door made a sound that might have been a laugh, cut off fast when Kang glanced at him. Kang did not glance at Amara that way. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door he has been walking past for years without noticing it was there. Your name. Why? Because I'd like to know it. People who want favors usually ask nicer than that. Something moved behind his face, not quite a smile, but close enough that Yoon, standing near the door with a tablet she had stopped pretending to read, filed it away as the first thing she had seen crack that particular mask in 9 years of watching it. I'm not asking for a favor, he said. I'm asking a question. Amara, she said finally, because there was no version of this where refusing further cost her less than answering did. Amara Bassi. Amara, he said it carefully, like a word in a language he was relearning. Bassi, Mr. O chose that exact moment to step forward with the check folder, sweating visibly now, because he had recognized, 4 minutes too late, exactly whose car was idling outside his restaurant. Mr. Kang, please, the meal is on us, of course, completely on us. And if there's anything else there is, Kang said, not looking at him. Her hours. What are they? Mr. O's mouth opened and closed once before anything came out. I'd have to check the schedule is quite. Check it. Now it was a small thing. It would look, later, like the smallest thing in the entire story. A rich man correcting a manager's math in front of 2 bodyguards and a kitchen that had gone silent enough to hear the walk-in compressor hum. But Amara watched Mr. O's face go through fear and recalculation in real time, watched him find, suddenly, in front of a man he could not afford to disappoint. that she was in fact owed for last Sunday, that the schedule had in fact miscounted her hours 3 weeks running, and she understood, without anyone explaining it to her, that something about tonight had just changed the physics of her kitchen, at least for as long as this man kept looking at Mr. O like that. "Pay her what the schedule says by Friday," Kang said. "All of it." "Yes, of course. Absolutely, sir." Kang turned back to her, and for 1 second only, something almost gentle moved across his face, gone before she could be sure she had seen it. "Thank you," he said. "Not for the soup." He did not say what for. "You don't need to thank me for doing my job. I know." He set money on the table that was easily 3 times the bill and did not wait for change, and did not look back once on his way to the door, though the 2 men with him noticed, because it was their job to notice everything about him, that he touched the door frame on his way out the way a man touches something to make sure it is real. In the car, he did not speak for 4 blocks. Then pull the file on that location. Bukchan table, 6th and Alameda. "Which file?" Yoon asked. "The restaurants or the blocks?" "Both." She did not ask why. She had learned in 9 years that when his voice went that quiet, it was not a request. She made the call before the car reached the freeway, and neither of them knew yet, could not have known, that the file she was about to pull had his own signature buried 14 months deep inside it, on a page neither of them had opened since the quarter it was filed. Amara did not think about him again that night, or told herself she didn't, which amounted to the same discipline either way. She finished the clothes. She scrubbed the pot until the copper caught the light over the stove. She lay down behind the curtain at 1:30 with her phone against her ear. Because Chidi always stayed up too late in Houston, and Ngozi always let him, and she listened to her son explain, at length and with enormous seriousness, why his class hamster deserved a name that meant brave in 3 different languages. "Mama eats after we sleep," he told his aunt once, months earlier, a sentence Ngozi had repeated to Amara with her voice breaking, not understanding that Amara had taught him that, so he would never worry about a bowl being empty when it wasn't, so that he would believe, all the way down, that there was always enough. "That way it is not lying," he'd said when Ngozi pressed him on it. Amara had cried in the bathroom the first time she heard that second hand, and had never once let her son see it. "Sleep, baby," she told him now. Ijeoma Mem. "Love you too, Mama." She hung up and looked at the ceiling, and did not think about a stranger's face changing shape over a bowl of soup, and thought about it anyway, for exactly as long as it took her to fall asleep. 11 floors above downtown, at almost the same hour, Kang Do-hyun opened the 3rd drawer of his desk for the first time in longer than he wanted to admit, and looked at a photograph of a woman in an apron, and did not close it again until morning. 2 worlds ran on beside each other after that, mostly without touching. Amara's ran on numbers, the way it always had. 31 eggs became 35 by Sunday delivery, still 4 short of the invoice, and she learned to stretch a dozen into a Tuesday lunch special without anyone at the register noticing the difference. $340 went to Ngozi on the 15th, wired in the 90 seconds between prep and service, because if she thought too long about the total in her account after, she would start doing math she could not afford to finish. She ironed her one good blouse Sunday nights for church, the thrift store green one with a seam she had taken in herself, because looking put together cost nothing and meant something, and her mother had taught her that too. You do not have to be rich to be careful, and careful is its own kind of rich. Mr. O paid her Friday, exactly as promised, exactly as ordered, and said nothing about it, and watched her differently for a week. The way men watch something they have just discovered has a value they did not previously account for. Kang's world ran on a different kind of number entirely. Meetings measured in millions, silences measured in board seats, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling glass that looked from a distance like the kind of place a person lived, and up close like a hotel room no one had checked into yet. Song Hae-in called twice that week, and he let both go to voicemail and told himself it was the Alameda vote keeping him occupied, though the Alameda vote had never once made him stand at a window at midnight thinking about the exact color of someone's sleeve, mended at the wrist with 3 small stitches, chosen thread that almost matched but not quite, because thread that matched exactly cost more. You've been strange all week, Yoon told him Thursday, setting the pulled files on his desk without comment, though her eyes lingered on him a beat longer than usual. Since Tuesday, specifically, I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't fine. I said you were strange. She tapped the folder. The Bukchon table files flagged under KG Realty. Q3 Directive Property. Staffing costs cut 40% 14 months ago, per your signature on page 11, my signature, along with about 40 others that quarter. You want me to pull the individual payroll records too? He looked at the folder for a long moment, the way he had looked at the soup before he ate it. Not yet, he said, and did not touch the folder again that week. Though it sat on the corner of his desk like something waiting to be opened, the way that drawer had sat closed for years before Tuesday night pried it back open. Their paths crossed once more that week, briefly, almost by accident, his car idling outside Bukchon table again on Thursday, a different meeting, a different deal, and this time he did not go in. He sat in the back seat and watched, through the window, a woman in a green blouse carry a tray of banchan to a table of 4, laughing at something one of them said, her whole face open in a way it had not been open for him, and something in his chest tightened at the sight of a stranger making her laugh that easily. Sir? Yoon asked, when he still had not moved 2 full minutes after the car stopped. Drive, he said. We're not stopping tonight. But he looked back once, through the rear window, at the light in that restaurant all the way to the corner, and Yoon, watching him in the rearview mirror, understood that whatever this was, it had already stopped being about soup. He came back the following Monday, alone this time, no guards at the door, just him, in a coat less expensive than the one from before, as if he had thought, somewhere between the car and the entrance, about how he wanted to look walking in. Amara saw him before he saw her, through the pass-through, and felt something in her stomach do a small, unwanted drop. You again, she said, when he'd settled into the same back booth. Me again. Same order? Different question, this time. She wiped her hands on the towel at her hip, unhurried, because unhurried was the only currency she had left that no one could take from her. I'm listening. I own a catering division. Corporate dinners, board functions, private events. It's underperforming. The food is, he searched for the word and did not find one generous enough. Forgettable, and I'd like to hire you to fix that. I have a job. I know. I'm not asking you to leave it. I'm asking you to take on the account on the side. 2 events a month, To start, I'll pay you directly, market rate or above it, whichever number makes this conversation shorter. She studied him for a long moment, the way she studied a delivery invoice she suspected had been padded. Why me? You know why. Say it anyway. He held her gaze and did not look away, though something in his jaw worked before the words came. Because I have eaten in restaurants on 4 continents, and I have not tasted anything since I was 9 years old that made me feel the way that soup did on Tuesday. I don't know what to do with that information except pay you for more of it. It was, she would think later, the most honest sentence a rich man had ever said to her, and she almost trusted it purely for how little it tried to flatter her. Terms, she said. Name them. I keep my shift here. This job doesn't change because of that one. Fine. You don't pay my rent, my bills, anything outside the contract. This is work, not charity, not whatever else it might look like from outside. Understood. And it ends whenever I say it ends. Not whenever you decide you're done being curious about me. That last one landed somewhere he had not expected it to, and he was quiet a moment before he answered, quiet in the particular way she was starting to recognize as him choosing his next words with unusual care. Agreed, then yes, she said. I'll do your catering. He almost smiled, the second time she'd seen it try to happen, and failed to fully arrive, and reached for his wallet to leave a deposit, and she stopped him with 2 fingers on the table. Not tonight. Send a contract like a normal business. I don't do handshakes with strangers who own buildings. Fair. That night, on the phone, Ngozi did not hide her alarm. A gangster, Amara, everyone in Koreatown knows the Kang name. You don't do business with a man like that without a lawyer and a plan. It's catering, Ngozi, not a marriage proposal. And what did Mama used to say about men who show up hungry at midnight? That feeding them isn't the same as loving them. Exactly. Keep it that way. I intend to. She did not tell her sister about the way his voice had cracked over the word thank you, or the 2 fingers she'd had to press to the table to make herself stop wanting to know more about what put that crack there. Some things you kept behind the curtain, along with the cot and the nightlight and the moon-shaped shadow it threw against the wall each night while she counted. One more time, everything she had left to hold on to. The first catering event was for 40 people. In a private dining room on the 31st floor of a building she had only ever seen from the street, and Amara brought her own knives, her own cloth, and, because the kitchen there had every appliance imaginable except the one thing she trusted, her mother's copper pot. Carried in a canvas bag on the bus like it was cargo worth more than she was. Kang found her in his own executive kitchen at 6 that evening, sleeves rolled, humming something under her breath that he did not recognize, and stood in the doorway a full 10 seconds before she noticed him. You're early, she said, without turning. It's my building. Doesn't mean you're not early. He stepped closer, drawn. He would think about this moment for months afterward, the exact pull of it, by the smell rising off her pot, a smell that reorganized something in his chest before his mind caught up to why. Doonjang, and something sharper under it, pepper and bone and hours. What is that? Peppered oxtail. My mother's base, Doonjang added, because Seoul taught me something Lagos didn't get to. She glanced at him. You want to taste it before the guests do? Or are you going to hover? I can hover and taste. No. Pick one. He tasted it, standing too close to her, at the stove in a kitchen with a view of half the city and closed his eyes for exactly 1 second longer than the moment required. My mother used to say, "A full pot is a full house," he said, before he decided to say it out loud. Amara went still at the stove, spoon halfway to the pot. Used to. She passed when I was 22. I'm sorry, she worked kitchens like this one, not owned them, worked them. He looked at the pot instead of at her, the way people look somewhere safer when the truth gets close to the surface. I don't talk about that with people I do business with. Then, I guess, Amara said carefully, we're not just doing business anymore. He did not answer that. He did not have to. The staff setting up the dining room next door caught the two of them standing closer to the stove than the recipe required and said nothing about it either, though Miss Yoon, arriving 20 minutes later with the guest list, took one look at her employer's face and understood, before anyone told her anything, that something in this building had shifted for good. Later that same night, after the guests had gone, after Amara had scraped and packed and thanked the catering staff by name, every one of them, which none of the other vendors ever did, she found herself alone at the pass-through window with Kang, both of them tired in the particular way that comes after doing something well. "Say something in Korean," he said, half a joke. She looked at him sideways. "Why would I do that?" Curiosity, she said something quick and clean, in an accent that had clearly spent real years in real kitchens, and his eyebrows went up before he could stop them. "You understood every word the server said tonight," he said slowly. "Didn't you? About the seating change, about Song's assistant complaining. Every word. You let them talk anyway. People say more true things around someone they think can't understand them." She wiped her hands unbothered. "It's usually worth listening." He laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised out of him. The first one Yoon had heard from him in a year, when she caught the tail end of it walking past. "That's a dangerous skill to have around men like my uncle. I've survived worse than your uncle." She did not know yet how true that sentence would turn out to be. Neither did he, though 3 floors down, in a records room that smelled of toner and old paper, a junior analyst named Park Se-joon had just pulled, per Miss Yoon's earlier instructions, the complete Bukchan table personnel file, cross-referenced against the Q3 efficiency directive, and found something that made him call Yoon's desk line at 11 that night instead of waiting for morning. "You're going to want to see this before he does," Park said. "Or maybe exactly because he needs to." The file sat on Kang's desk for 2 days before he opened it. 2 days of catering menus and a second dinner, and the night he walked her the 2 blocks from his building to the bus stop because she'd refused a car. 2 days in which something between them had grown soft edges it had not had before, careful and slow and entirely unspoken. He opened the folder on a Thursday morning, alone, before Yoon arrived, meaning to clear it from his desk the way he cleared everything else, quickly, without residue. He did not close it quickly. Page 11 was his signature, exactly where Yoon had said it would be, dated 14 months back, authorizing across-the-board wage restructuring for 6 properties under KG Realty, Bukchan Table among them. Page 14 was the payroll history for that address, before and after. $19.50 an hour, cut to $11.75, effective the pay period immediately following his signature. Page 16 carried one name, highlighted, he assumed, by Park, though he never asked. Bassie, A, line cook. Reclassified, part-time, no benefits, no scheduled overtime. Beneath it, in Mr. O's handwriting, a note dated 4 months ago. Employee has requested to use dry storage as temporary residence. Approved, off book, in lieu of severance owed. He read that line 4 times. He did the arithmetic without meaning to. The way a man who has run companies his whole adult life cannot help but do arithmetic, even when the number breaks something in him to calculate. $19.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, 14 months against $11.75. $9,282. That was the exact distance between what she had been owed and what she had been paid. And somewhere in that distance was a lost apartment, a son in Houston, 134 nights on a cot behind a kitchen he had eaten in twice without knowing any of it. All of it traced back, cleanly, unmistakably, to a signature at the bottom of a page he had not read past the summary of 14 months before. He sat with that for a long time, long enough that Yoon knocked twice before he answered. The Alameda vote, she said, stepping in carefully, reading something in his stillness that made her lower her voice. It's in 6 days now. The board wants the whole corridor, including Bukchan's block. Full demolition, mixed-use rebuild. Your uncle's already lined up the votes. Including her building. Including her building. Sir, did you find something in that file? He closed it before she could see the page it was open to. I need you to do something for me, he said, and I need you not to ask why yet. All right. Pull every property under the Q3 directive. Every single one. I want to know exactly what that policy cost every employee on every payroll it touched. All of it. By Monday. Yoon studied him, the folder now shut under his hand, and did not ask the question she wanted to ask, because 9 years had taught her exactly when not to. I'll have it Monday. He did not tell Amara that week. He told himself it was timing, the vote, the numbers, the need to understand the full shape of the damage before he brought any of it to her. And some of that was true. But underneath the timing was something smaller and less defensible. He did not know how to say the sentence, I did this to you, without also saying, I have been sitting across from you for 2 weeks, knowing it. And every day he did not say it. The not saying grew heavier until it sat in the room with them at every dinner like a third person neither of them had invited. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She had spent her whole life reading rooms for the thing no one was saying out loud. That was half of how she'd survived this long. But she read the distance as something else. Nerves, maybe. The board vote everyone in the building was whispering about. She did not read it as a folder on his desk with her name inside it, because there was no version of the last 2 weeks that had prepared her to expect that particular shape of betrayal, dressed as it was in kindness the whole time. You're somewhere else tonight, she told him, over the last of a 4th dinner. one he'd asked for outside any catering contract. Just the two of them, in a kitchen that had stopped feeling sterile to either of them weeks ago. I'm here. You're not. She set down her spoon. I've spent my whole life reading men who say one thing and carry another. You're carrying something. He almost told her then. He got as far as opening his mouth, as far as the first two words of a sentence that would have changed everything that came after. And then his phone lit up on the counter. Song Hae-in's name across the screen. 3 missed calls in a row, and Yoon's message underneath it. The gala's tonight. Your uncle's asking where you are. He's already talking to Song about the announcement. I have to go, he said instead, and hated himself for it even as he said it. Go then. Amara. Go, she said again, gentler this time, giving him the exit because that was what she did. Gave people room, even when some old animal part of her had already started counting the ways this could end badly. We'll talk tomorrow. He left. He did not tell her. And 6 days became a number that would matter more than either of them yet understood, because the board vote was no longer the only clock ticking in that building, and the loudest one belonged to a woman named Song Hae-in, who had noticed exactly how much of Kang Do-hyun's attention had gone missing over the last 2 weeks, and had every intention of finding out where. The gala was the kind of event where everyone's smile cost more than most people's rent, and Song Hae-in wore hers like jewelry. You've been distracted, she said, appearing at Kang's elbow with 2 glasses of champagne, handing him one whether he wanted it or not. Your uncle's noticed. I've noticed. I've had a lot on my plate. Is that what we're calling her? Song smiled at his silence, which told her everything his words hadn't. Do-hyun, I don't care who you eat dinner with. I care what it costs us when the wrong photograph turns up in the wrong feed 3 days before a board vote that decides whether this company keeps its zoning exemptions. There's no photograph. Not yet. Across the room, Chairman Kang Tae-sik held court near the bar. And when Do-hyun finally crossed to him, his uncle did not bother with pleasantries. The Alameda vote, Tae-sik said. 6 days. I need you focused, not wherever you've apparently been spending your evenings. I am focused. Are you? His uncle's voice dropped into the register he used for things he considered delicate. There's a resourcing matter in the Bukchon file. A cook, living on site, off the books. It's a manageable optics issue right now. It stops being manageable if the wrong person notices you've taken a personal interest in the woman in question. 3 days before a vote that decides the fate of that exact block. Say what you mean. I mean that a chaebol heir, photographed leaving a restaurant with an employee who is technically homeless, on company property, under a labor policy this family authorized, that is not a headline we survive during a zoning vote. Handle it quietly before someone else handles it for you. Do-hyun did not answer. He was thinking instead about a pot on a stove and a sentence he had still not said out loud, and how much smaller his uncle's version of the problem was than the real one sitting unopened in a folder on his desk. He left the gala without telling Song or his uncle where he was going. He told his driver 6th and Alameda and sat in silence the whole way, rehearsing badly a sentence that had no good version. He was too late to say it that night in the way he'd planned. His phone rang before the car reached the restaurant. Mr. O, breathless, talking too fast about a corporate compliance inspection scheduled for the following morning. A walkthrough that would find a cot behind a kitchen and a woman with nowhere else to go. And how bad, how very bad that would look for everyone. And shouldn't someone quietly move her out before then? For her own good, really, before the inspectors. Don't touch anything, Do-hyun said. I'll handle it myself. Tomorrow. He never got the chance, because at 11:52 that same night, an unknown number sent Amara a single photograph. Herself, leaving Kang Group's building 2 nights earlier. His hand briefly at the small of her back as he'd steadied her against the wind. Captioned in a tabloid gossip account with a word she had heard used against her before. In gentler company, always meant to diminish. Exotic. The comments underneath had already started, faster and crueler than she had braced for. And beneath the photograph was a second image, one she had not known existed until that second. The Bukchon table personnel file, the page with her own name on it. The note about dry storage, screenshotted and circled in red, sent from the same unknown number with 4 words attached. He signed this 14 months ago. She sat very still on her cot, phone glowing in the dark, and read it twice, and did not cry, because crying was not the thing her body wanted to do. It wanted to be sick. It wanted to laugh, once, ugly and short, at how thoroughly she had let herself believe that a man who ate her food like it meant something could not also be the reason she'd had nowhere else to sleep. She did not call him that night. She did not need to hear him explain it to know, in her bones, that he had known. That the distance at dinner, the phone call he'd rushed off to answer, the 2 weeks of something almost said and never finished, all of it traced back to a truth he had chosen every single day not to hand her. She packed the pot first. Everything else could stay. Kang arrived at Bukchon table at 7 the next morning, early enough to beat the inspection, carrying a version of the truth he had finally decided to say out loud, and found the storage room empty, the cot folded against the wall, the curtain pushed back on its rod like something that had already stopped needing to hide. Mr. O would not meet his eyes. She quit at 5 this morning, left her uniform folded on the counter, didn't say where she was going. Did she say anything at all? Mr. O hesitated, then reached into his apron pocket and handed over a single folded note. Because even a man like Mr. O understood, looking at Kang's face, that some things were not his to keep from someone. Do-hyun unfolded it in the middle of the empty kitchen, in the gray early light, and read 4 lines in handwriting he had never seen before and would recognize instantly for the rest of his life. You didn't lie to me with words. You lied with silence. Which is worse? Because I would have forgiven the truth. Don't look for me. I have survived worse men than you, and I will survive this too. A. He read it 3 times. He did not crumple it. He folded it back along its original creases and put it in his coat and stood in that kitchen a long time, in the smell of a stove gone cold, and understood with a clarity that felt less like realization and more like something breaking open at last, that she had not slammed the door on her way out. That was the part he could not stop hearing. The silence of it. No shouting, no scene, nothing for the staff to whisper about beyond the folded uniform and the note he now carried against his chest like a stone. She had simply gone, the way water goes when you tip the pot too far, not violently, just completely. And no amount of wanting it back would make it rise again on its own. He went to the office instead of home. He canceled every meeting on his calendar for that day except one, and told Yoon when she found him at his desk at 9 with the folder from 2 weeks ago open in front of him and Amara's note beside it, exactly what he intended to do. You understand what this costs, Yoon said quietly once he'd finished. Reversing the directive company-wide. Retroactive back pay across 6 properties. Halting the Alameda vote. Your uncle will call it sentiment. The board will call it worse. Let them call it whatever they want. They'll ask why. Then I'll tell them why. He closed the folder. Get me the full number. Every dollar this policy cost every worker it touched. I want it exact, not rounded. And get my uncle in this office by noon. I'm not asking him, I'm telling him. Yoon studied him for a long moment. 9 years of watching this man make careful, bloodless, correct decisions. And here, finally, was one that was none of those things, and somehow more right than any of them. Yes, sir, she said, and went to make the calls, and did not smile until she closed the door behind her. The number, when Park Sejun finished running it 2 days later, came to $6,800,000. Full retroactive back pay across every property touched by the Q3 directive. Restored wages going forward, and the structural retrofit costs of the Alameda block in place of demolition. Because Kang Do-hyun stood in front of his own board 4 days before the scheduled vote and told them, without notes, that the corridor would not be raised. This is not a policy reversal, his uncle said afterward, in a room that had gone very quiet. This is you burning $6.8 million because a woman left you a note. This is a correction, Do-hyun said. The policy was wrong before I ever met her. I signed it without reading it. That's on me, not on her, and definitely not on this board's convenience. The Alameda land value is not worth more than what we did to the people standing on it. He looked around the table at faces that had approved worse without blinking, and did not raise his voice because he had learned somewhere in the last 2 weeks that the loudest thing in a room is sometimes the person who refuses to shout. I'll take the vote to a full shareholder review if I have to. But I am not signing another quarter of this policy. Not one more. The vote to halt demolition passed, narrowly, 4 days later, and the story broke that same week. Not the tabloid version, but the real one. A company statement admitting the wage policy's harm. A retroactive payment schedule. A corridor saved instead of raised. And it cost Kang Group exactly what Do-hyun had said it would, in money and in market confidence, and in the particular, public, unmistakable currency of admitting fault out loud. He did not do it to win her back. He told himself that at the time, and mostly believed it. But when it was finished, when the statement had gone out, and the checks had gone into the mail, and his uncle had stopped speaking to him for the better part of a week, he drove to the address Yoon had quietly found for him, a friend's apartment in Inglewood, where Amara had been staying since the note, and stood outside with an envelope he did not, in the end, hand her. She opened the door before he could decide. "If that's a check," she said, arms crossed, "you can take it back." "It's not a check." "What is it then?" "A job offer. Kang Group is opening a worker advisory position, reviewing labor policy before it reaches my desk, not after. Full authority to flag anything before it's signed. I want you to run it. You want to hire the woman you almost ruined. I want to stop being the kind of man who signs things without knowing whose life is under his signature. I can't do that without someone in the room who's lived it." He held out the envelope anyway, and when she still didn't take it, set it on the step between them instead. "This isn't charity, Amara. I'm not paying you to forgive me. I'm asking you to make sure I never do this to anyone else again. That requires your mind, not your gratitude." She looked at the envelope a long time. "I'm not a charity case." "I know. And I'm not coming back because you fixed a policy. Policies should have been fixed whether I existed or not." "I know that too." "Then why are you here?" "Because the policy wasn't the only thing I got wrong." He met her eyes and did not look away this time, not once. "I should have told you the day I found that file. Every day after that, I told myself I was choosing the right time. I wasn't. I was choosing the version of this where I didn't have to watch your face while I said it. That was cowardice, wearing a very good coat. And I am sorry for exactly that, separate from everything the company owes you." Amara stood in the doorway a long moment, arms still crossed, though something in her shoulders had loosened by a degree neither of them could have measured. "I'm not saying yes tonight," she said finally. "I'm not asking you to. But I'll read the job description." She picked up the envelope at last, weighing it once in her hand before she did. "And Do-hyun, if I take this, it's on my terms. All of them. I don't answer to your uncle. I don't get quiet when the board doesn't like what I find. And I keep my restaurant plans moving with or without your company's money. Your restaurant. I've been saving toward one since I was 22. This just moves the date up." She almost smiled, the first one he'd seen from her in 11 days. "Don't look so surprised. Some of us had plans before you ever walked into my kitchen. I'd like to hear about them. Maybe, she said, and closed the door. Gently, not unkindly, and he stood on the step a moment longer before he let himself smile the way he hadn't in longer than he could count. She called 2 weeks later, not to say yes to the job outright, but to ask him to dinner. Her choice of restaurant, her terms. And when he arrived, she was already seated, the copper pot absurdly, wonderfully out of place on the white tablecloth beside her, because she'd insisted on cooking the meal herself in a kitchen that had let her borrow it for the night. One dinner, she said when he sat down, and I keep the restaurant, the one you're going to help me lease, honestly, at fair rate like any other tenant, because I earned the recommendation from your own retail division, not because you owe me one. Agreed. And the advisory job. I'll take it, but you don't get to call it generosity in any press release ever, because it isn't. Agreed to that too. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, leaving the last inch for her to close if she chose to. Is that everything? Almost. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing something she'd clearly been carrying since the note. Who taught you to eat like it mattered? The first night. You didn't just eat that soup. You listened to it. My mother, he said simply. She used to say a full pot is a full house. I think some part of me has been looking for that house since I was 22 and it went quiet. You found the pot, Amara said softly. Maybe the house comes next. He closed the last inch between their hands. I asked you once who made this soup, he said. I never asked the better question. Which was? Who taught you to make people feel less alone with it? My mother, she said, echoing him, and something about the symmetry of it undid them both a little. She used to say the same thing about a full pot. Different words, same house. He kissed her then, careful, unhurried, the way a man kisses something he has waited a very long time to be sure of. And it was brief and gentle and entirely certain, and neither of them needed it to be anything more than exactly that. I'm staying, she told him afterward, because I choose to. Not because of the job or the lease or anything you fixed. I want that understood. Understood, he said, and meant it, all the way down. 6 months later, the corner of 6th and Alameda looked mostly the same, except for the new sign above the old restaurant's door. In Kiru's table, in gold letters, and beneath it, smaller, a line only regulars would ever ask about. Est, in memory of a full pot. Amara owned it outright, on a lease negotiated by her own lawyer at market rate, no favors attached. And the copper pot sat in the glass case by the entrance now, replated in silver by a jeweler on Wilshire who had refused to charge her a fair price until she threatened to take her business elsewhere. A small plaque beneath it read, $14, 9 quarts, 40 bowls a night, 40 years of never once running empty. The Full Pot Fund, administered jointly by Amara and Kane Group's new Worker Advisory Office, had by then distributed back pay and job placement to 1,100 employees across the properties the old directive had touched, and funded free kitchen apprenticeship slots for 6 people a year who needed exactly the kind of second chance a supply closet had once quietly given her. The first graduate of that program, a 19-year-old named Titi, who had been sleeping in her car until 3 months earlier, now ran in Kiru's table's lunch service most days. And Amara had made sure, quietly, the way these things are best done, that nobody in that kitchen ever had to hide a cot behind a curtain to keep a job. Mr. O had been let go within a month of the story breaking, replaced by a manager who paid overtime on time and never once used the word optics in a sentence about a human being. Song Kayen's leak had been traced eventually back to her own assistant's account, and whatever remained of her social standing in that circle had gone with it, quietly, the way these things tend to go once the right people stop returning your calls. Chairman Kang Tae-sik had resigned from the board 2 months after the vote, not entirely by choice, and had sent, of all things, a short letter of apology to Amara that she kept, still unopened, in a drawer, deciding some corrections take longer than 6 months to earn. Ngozi had flown out for the restaurant's opening night with Chidi, who spent most of dinner interrogating Kang Do-hyun with the seriousness only a 7-year-old can bring to a stranger dating his mother. "Do you know how to make soup?" Chidi asked him, very solemnly, over a bowl he had not yet touched. "Not like your mother." "Nobody does," Chidi said with total confidence and went back to his food. And Kang Do-hyun laughed, really laughed, the kind Yoon still hadn't gotten fully used to hearing. And Amara, watching from the kitchen pass through, thought that if her mother's line was ever going to be fulfilled all the way, it would look exactly like this: a full house around a full pot, nobody in it, eating alone. That Saturday and most Saturdays after, the two of them stood on the restaurant's back steps once service ended, looking out at a skyline that had never once noticed either of them and never would. And that was, Amara had come to think, the whole point of it, that dignity did not require an audience, only the truth of who stood beside you when the lights went out and the pot went quiet for the night. "A full pot is a full house," he said one of those nights, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "Feed the table before you feed your name," she answered, and felt him smile against her skin. "I think our mothers would have liked each other. I think they'd have argued about whose broth was better. They'd have been right to." Below them, the city kept its own hours, indifferent and glittering, the way it always had. But on that particular step, in that particular quiet, neither of them needed it to notice anything at all. If Amara's pot meant something to you tonight, I'd love to know it. Would you have taken his job offer after everything he kept from you? Or made him earn his way back further than one dinner, the way she almost did? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And stories like this one only find the people who need them because you take the time to talk about them. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A full pot never stays empty for long, and neither, it turns out, does a house that's finally been seen. Thank you for spending this time with me. See you in the next story.